Welcome to Navigating Disruption. I'm Shaquille Barmel, and I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, a consultant, and a speaker, and I help individuals, teams, and leaders navigate disruption with competence, confidence, and character. In the Navigating Disruption podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders that are making impact in the face of uncertainty. So this year marks the 20th year since I graduated from business school. And this normally would be a homecoming year and would be gathering together with our fellow classmates in London, Ontario, just to reconnect and re-engage with the school. We're all looking forward to it. But of course, that is not going to happen this year. And there are some virtual events happening that allow us to re-engage with the school, but it just won't be the same. So I've decided that this year I am going to record a few episodes with former classmates that I haven't seen in the last 20 years as a way of commemorating this special year. The last 20 years have been filled with disruption, and our class has been in the middle of it and leading some of it. And now there is a pandemic and the unprecedented and uncertain shift in our lives going forward. So in these episodes, I will have brief interviews with my classmates, members of the MBA 2000 class at Ivey, to answer the question of looking back on the last 20 years, what lessons do you draw that will help us in the next 20 years? I hope you enjoy these interviews. What do you get when you take a self-declared introvert, combine her with self-confidence, an open mind, and a strong desire to develop others? You get one of the only female IT senior executives successfully leading one of the largest IT infrastructure teams in corporate Canada. In this second episode of the Days of Future Past miniseries, I speak to Alison James, the Senior Vice President of Technology Operations at one of Canada's largest banks, CIBC. Alison graduated with me from the Ivey School of Business 20 years ago. While I knew her, we just didn't seem to cross paths very much. That was my loss. Alison is considered one of the top 50 women in Fintech in Canada and chairs the Toronto chapter of the Canadian Women in Technology. What is interesting is that Alison did not ever seek a career in technology. In this episode, I learn how Alison climbed to one of the top leadership roles in the male-dominated field of technology, what she learned along the way, and how she's preparing to lead in the next 20 years. Hi, Alison. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Great to see you. You look very much the same, but just without glasses, from what I remember.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you for making the time and for adjusting all the things you had to adjust and juggle. I know it's a busy time.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
I'm enjoying this project I've created for myself. It's giving me the opportunity to connect with some classmates. It's been fun.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what you do right now, your role.
Well, right now I run the technology operations team at CIBC. So that's and essentially there's probably a couple thousand people just over on the team, and we run the infrastructure environment. So everything from the network, data centers, all the platforms, Windows, mainframe, Unix, all the end user, desktop telephony, help desk, IT help desk, you name it. So anything that falls under that infrastructure sort of window is
Wow.
me, my
Alison,
team.
that is quite a weight on your shoulders.
It was during COVID, I'll tell you that much.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Can you tell me a little bit about that moment that when you first found out the implications for you and your team?
Yeah. Well, we had been meeting as our crisis team earlier than obviously when the pandemic was announced, and planning what we would do. So we had actually put into place a couple of our plans prior to the pandemic hitting
Hmm.
to just to be safe,
Right.
our business continuity plans.
Yeah.
But nobody would have expected
Right.
what came in the coming weeks, which was nobody going to work
Right.
except the most client facing required people. We had banking centers that we shut down, et cetera. So yeah, it was intense getting our workforce working from home.
Yeah.
Happy to say that at CIBC we were always a digital first kind of bank.
Yeah.
So our digital properties and our ability to continue all the online POS, all the remote banking transactions went very, very smoothly, and our
Good.
systems could handle that,
Good.
very, very well.
Yeah.
So that was the good news. And then, the other part is people who aren't used to working from home and
Yeah.
having them work with our technology. And of
Yeah.
course, at a bank, we have to have different levels of security that people need to go through to get
Yeah.
into our network.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. A lot of people not understanding why we needed to do that, and teaching them and showing them through,
Yeah.
or not using our mobile to access our network, and teaching and showing people and getting people set up. So lots of excitement.
Yeah, I can imagine in a very short period of time because, of
Yes.
course, you had customers at the same time that needed to keep
Yeah.
doing business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, well, you're
Yeah.
smiling. Well, that's good.
Yes, yeah, it is an amazing team. We
Yeah.
all pulled together. There were for sure sleepless
Yeah.
nights.
Yeah.
None of us will ever forget that.
Yeah.
But what takes you through is the team that you have and the people that you won't forget the time, but you also won't forget the people that
Yeah.
you were with when it happened.
Yeah. And I think people did tend to pull out all the stops here
Yeah,
to do whatever they need to do to keep things going, which is so inspiring.
yeah, yeah. It
That's
was good
great.
to see. Yeah.
Have you always been in IT infrastructure? Is that your
No,
background?
no, no, so not.
How did that happen? How did that
Yeah,
happen?
that very accidentally,
Okay.
because even when I left Ivey, I
Mhm.
never thought I was going to be going into technology.
Mhm.
So it really happened by chance because I was looking for a promotion.
Mhm.
So at the time, I was working at Canadian Tire, and
Okay.
I had done a project with the IT folks,
Okay.
and frankly couldn't understand a thing they were talking about, and made it clear that they needed to talk in English to us, regular business people.
Yeah.
And after that project, they approached me about taking a job in technology and,
Wow.
helping the tech team to explain things in English is sort of how I put
Wow.
it. And I really didn't want that job because I didn't want to go into technology. I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what a
Yeah.
server farm was. I didn't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
But a mentor of mine who, back then we didn't really formally call it mentors, say
Mhm.
mentors, sponsors, that kind of thing. But he said to me, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You don't like
Right.
it, you get another job,
Right.
right? You move on,
Yeah.
and it's a promotion. So take it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did, and I've never left. And
Yeah.
I want to say that's 12 years ago now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that mentor, do you still keep in touch with that individual or no?
Yes, that mentor is now the CEO of Sobeys.
That is
Yes.
amazing. And so that was a very powerful question he asked you. A couple of them there. One, what's the worst that could happen?
Right. Right. It made me stop and think, because you don't stop to think about that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? The
What's
worst that could happen is I don't like it.
yeah.
That's not that bad.
Yeah. Right. Right. So
Right.
that is a really, really helpful. I think it's really helpful in our lives to have people like that that will ask us those very clear and sobering
Yeah.
questions. And I think, do you think
Yes.
that's an important part of being a leader now is to have a few trusted people that will tell you what they think?
Yeah. And he actually, I turned to him when I had the offer from CIBC
Hmm.
as well. And that's I left Canadian Tire and came to CIBC, and I went to him and said, this is a big deal. What do you think? And I want your honest opinion, because I think you probably want me to stay here at
Yeah.
Canadian Tire with you,
Yeah.
but what do you think? And he said, I think you should take the job. So, having someone that can just be very, very honest with you.
Yeah.
And that's, I've never forgotten that. And I talk to people at CIBC and I say to them, I will, here's how I think about you, and I'll support you. And I've seen your work, and I hope that we can keep you here at CIBC, but I'm going to support you even if a different job comes up that wherever you want to end up in your career, I'll support you.
Yeah.
As long as I, obviously know their work. And
that's, I think that's really a great example of a leadership, people first leadership. And yes, of course you care about the business, but you really want to help that individual. That's one of the things that I realized early in my career. Is I used to have this statement that I would have with my staff that would say, anytime I wanted to talk to them about something that I think was good for them, but not necessarily good for the organization, I would say, okay, I'm going to take off my company hat off now, and I'm going to talk to you about you. Yeah. And the truth is that shouldn't be a separate conversation, right? Really, what's good for the individual actually in the long term is good for the organization. Right. And so that's incredible. So that mentor actually influenced that apply. The lesson you learned from them and the way they treated you actually translated in how you treat your teams. It's kind of that ripple effect. I love that.
It is. Yeah. It is.
That's great.
And I often say to people, will say to me, what's one piece of advice that you would give? And my number one piece of advice is always keep an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from learning it myself. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have an open mind, I never would have taken that job in technology. I was leaning towards no.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't want to come in and do a tech job every day.
Yeah. So can I ask you a little bit about so from my experience, I'll tell you, part of my objective with this project is I wanted to actually also highlight some of the women in our class that have climbed to very senior positions. I think it's very important to show those examples. IT is not something where you see a lot of women in those roles. Yeah. Can you give me a perspective on what has been the experience like for you in climbing into this profession as a woman?
Yeah, you're right. There aren't a lot, and there certainly aren't a lot in the area that I'm in now, which is, networking,
right?
Data centers, like the deep infrastructure technologies are not exciting to some people, super exciting to me, but not exciting to some people. And we don't have a lot of women. It tends to be 24 hours.
Yeah. Right.
Things can happen anytime, and that may scare some people away. But my experience, and I think it's a combination of timing, luck, and I would say I do have a level of confidence to not let things bother me.
Yeah.
And, I am extremely introverted and was very, very quiet, certainly when I was at MBA school. And throughout my career, what I have heard is you need to speak up more. You need to talk. You need to share your opinion.
Right.
And, you do need to do that. And I tell people that, you do need to you do need to speak up. If you're quiet, it gets easier with practice, but you do need to do it. So my experience has been good, in part because, I've had people believing in me, mm-hmm. and sometimes putting me in roles I didn't think maybe I could do, but encouraged me to take. Mm-hmm. It has been good. I know not so for other women, mm-hmm. certainly, but for me it has, and part of that too, I am very lucky to have a high degree of self-confidence, even though I'm an introvert.
Yeah. Did you always have that self-confidence, do you think, even when you were at Ivey, for example, or?
Yeah.
So you always had the confidence, you didn't always vocalize it.
I sure didn't. Sure didn't. But I always knew what I could do, what I was capable of. And, I never let being scared or not having the experience stop me from it, from
Yeah.
any of, and I didn't worry about that too much. I figured I could learn it.
Hmm.
So, that I think helped. And it is something that I'm lucky to
Hmm.
have, because you can be in meetings and just have things shatter around you, right?
Right.
It's sometimes very difficult to get into a conversation with
Yeah.
loud personalities, not
Yeah.
just men, but just loud people who talk over one another, and who, you know, um, just are extroverts
Yeah.
and different, right? So I think that's the one thing about this working from home. We use Teams at CIBC.
Hmm.
There's a raise your hand feature, right? And there's a
Right.
raise your hand feature on WebEx, and all these. So that is actually very useful for people who, are introverts. Actually makes people stop and say, oh, we need to let, so and so into the conversation. So
Yeah.
it's good that the technology is recognizing that, introverts need a way to get in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I see it.
But like you say, being a self-declared introvert yourself, you can actually empathize with other introverts
Yeah,
and create a bit of safety, or create
yeah,
some kind of rules of engagement to
right,
encourage people to speak up.
right.
You've been there.
Right. And I think that, another thing that's really important for all leaders, not just leaders of introverts,
Hmm.
is when you are meeting with people, we make sure we go around and everybody speaks at some point, right? We
Yeah.
ask, what do you think?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add? This is your area. You haven't said anything yet. How are you feeling about this?
Right.
That's how you get people to share, and that's how you include people
Yeah.
in a meeting, right?
Yeah.
So not just making them feel like they can
Right.
talk, but actually asking them to
Right.
talk. And you have to stop talking yourself to do that.
Right. So I mean, that's not just good for morale. It's also good for outcome and business results, right?
Right, right.
And I guess the implication is these days we talk a lot about diversity um, and doing it because it's right to have people that represent different uh, ways of living and countries they came from, ethnicity. Is so important, but that also brings diverse perspectives, which leads to a better business outcome at the end of the day. So,
Yes.
it's so important to do that. So that's
Yeah.
incredible. You talked about kind of keeping an open mind, and you talked about
Mhm.
confidence to speak up. I often wonder what's the interplay of the two. I remember talking to somebody who said, yeah, it's important to keep an open mind, and it's important to be confident, but sometimes your confidence pushes your perspective forward and kind of works counter to keeping the open mind and listening to other perspectives. What's your thought
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I could see how that could happen. I think that, you know, especially in my situation where I'm a natural introvert and tend
Mm-hmm.
to do more listening than talking. And I'm also not super quick on my feet, which what I mean by that is I do like to get the information, think
Right,
about it. So, that's just me. But I think for me personally, that's the interplay works because of
right,
that.
right,
But I certainly have seen people who um, are confident and portray confidence in what they're thinking. It's
right.
one thing to have confidence in yourself that you can do something. It's another thing to think that you're always right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you
Yeah.
have experience? Again, you're confident, but do you have experience with people that you feel have underestimated you?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, for sure. I mean, times where I did not get roles that I
Yeah,
thought I would be perfect for, and how could
yeah,
they not see that?
yeah, yeah.
As an example, but also times where, I was not getting support from a manager that
Hmm.
I thought I deserved.
Hmm.
Um, and realized, sometimes you have to move managers to get the support that you need. And that wasn't just an ego thing. I think that I had spent quite a bit of time with that individual, with the manager. He had seen my work and really felt, you know, I think he maybe thought I was younger than I
Hmm.
actually was, and felt there were other people that had put in more time,
Hmm.
you know, and deserved certain promotions ahead of me.
Hmm.
So I've certainly dealt with that. Yeah.
And how have you gotten stronger because of that? What has it enabled you to do differently?
Well, you know, you first have to take a look at yourself and see what, you know, is there truth in what this person's saying? And there may be. You maybe
Hmm.
do need to get certain kinds of experience before you're ready for certain roles. I
Hmm.
agree with that.
Hmm.
Um, but there's a difference between getting experience that's necessary and, you know, just someone being there 5 years longer than you,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you may have experience from other roles that you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do think that it makes you look at yourself in terms of how others perceive you,
Yeah.
and you need to make sure you understand that. You also need to decide, and everyone has choices about staying or leaving. And in my case, I did want to leave that manager,
Hmm.
um, you know, after a number of years
Yeah.
and a number of discussions on what seemed like the same topic towards the latter part of us working together. And
Hmm.
sometimes you make those types of decisions too, where, you know, do you risk staying too much longer with the exact same outcome?
Hmm.
Or do you take the risk and move?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What you're touching on here for me feels a lot about the importance of self-reflection, self-awareness, and that's
mm-hmm.
a really good also tool to balance between kind of confidence and the open-mindedness. Because although you felt confident that you were ready for those roles, you also took a step to say, well, let me just think about, is there some truth in what that other person is
Sure.
thinking and saying, and forcing
Yeah,
you to kind of self-reflect. I think it's such an important part of leadership.
yeah.
Do you have a regular kind of formal reflective practice now, or is it something that just kind of happens as you day to day?
Well, I do ask my team members
Mm-hmm.
for advice,
Mm.
and whether that's about me personally and how I'm doing,
Yeah,
what they could use more of from me or less of from
yeah,
me,
yeah,
and also in role, you know, how about the actual job I'm doing. But I do have I do have a desire to get that kind of feedback, not in a way that says, I'd like feedback on me. Can you give me, but more about, you know, what advice do you have for me in this, you know, in this moment, right? Of the
yeah,
last couple months, what's you've been seeing. So we do have those conversations. I think it's important for people who work for me to
yeah,
be able to tell me that. And I have got lots of things, lots of things back
yeah.
from them, which has been very useful. And I started doing this a number of years ago, um, because I did uh, you know, one of the leadership court things was to have a 360 done on me. And my staff came back with some negative things to say about how
Huh.
closed I was to them.
Mm.
I didn't share enough. I didn't tell them about myself. And I had always just thought, well, why would they be interested? They're all older than I am. They have families. They're married. I wasn't at the time. I didn't have a lot in common. Our interests were different, and I just assumed that they weren't interested in, you know, what I did on the weekend.
Yeah,
So I just got right to work. I never bothered
yeah,
asking them, you know, and they wanted to, and that's when I realized, like, people want to know you as a
yeah.
person,
It's
right?
true.
They don't want you to just come in and boss them around and manage
Right.
them and evaluate their work, right? They
Yeah.
actually want to get to know you. And so that really changed my perspective. It really hit me, because I didn't think that's how they thought of me,
Right.
uh, which was very, very eye opening. And I said to myself at the time, I need to make sure that I get feedback so that I can not be so surprised ever again.
Wow. So, I mean, that 360 assessment seems like it was a bit of a defining moment for you in your
Yeah,
leadership because it
it
exposed a
was.
blind spot that you didn't realize was there.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
I'm doing a lot of actual debriefing on 360 assessments this week
yeah,
as a coach.
yeah.
Any advice that you would have for somebody that's helping somebody go through 360 on being ready to take it? Because some of the items are going to be tough for them to
Yeah,
process.
yeah. Well, we're all grown-ups, right?
Yeah.
And I think the way that it was presented to me, that was, there's always different ways you can share feedback.
Hmm.
And some you can share that people take away only the negative, and others people take away there's a positive in this, and it
Right.
actually incents you to do something about it.
Right.
And that's how it was presented to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's how people don't necessarily do that to me now, but
Yeah.
that's how I always like to share the feedback.
Yeah.
There's a bunch, the good things are easy to talk about,
Yeah.
right? But the negatives, you can always talk about them in terms of, here's some things that you might want to think about doing more of, or have you ever thought of, because it looks like, you know,
Yeah.
the perception is, right? And it's really all about people's perception of you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just reading into your leadership style, and one of the things it seems like you spend a lot of time doing, you're very senior in the organization. You're probably in kind of the very top tier of leadership at CIBC, but yet you make efforts to be accessible. It sounds like you made efforts to make sure people
Yeah.
are comfortable with you, and you seek their input. You actually ask them advice, which
Yeah.
must be so empowering for your team.
Yeah, some people don't. Certainly, the first time I ask them to, I do a skip level meeting
Yeah.
with, or try to at least quarterly, and I ask them as well. And a lot of, the first time I ask people, oh, like I don't know what to say about that,
Yeah.
but then they'll, they do respond to that eventually as we get to
Yeah.
know each other. I do think it's important to give people time, and I try to put away 2 hours a week, which is 4 half-hour sessions, to either mentor people, get to know people I've met. We have a program at CIBC called Achievers, where
Hmm.
we take sort of the highest performing staff on a trip to Mexico. And
Oh,
last year I went as an executive host, and met some people, and have reached out to them since I've been back, or they've reached out to me, and I make sure that I'm able to give them time.
hmm.
So I try to spend a minimum of 2 hours a week, which certainly can eat into
Sure.
your week, but long days are okay when those are the types of things
Yeah.
that that's taking you over the regular business day mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Allison, from this conversation, I've picked up a few things that I'm going to draw on and say these might be your advice to other leaders, and you can correct me or add other things. So, I've picked up the whole idea about uh, exposing yourself to challenging areas, even though you might not be comfortable trying things that are different. What's the worst thing that could happen? You could
Hmm.
shift, you could pivot, you can change.
Yeah.
I've learned from you the importance of keeping an open mind, partly to challenge, but partly to other perspectives and opinions and feedback. Um,
Yeah.
Self-awareness and self-reflection is something you say is really important. Being able to look at yourself, being able to look at the team around you and making sure they all have a voice and you're getting diverse perspectives is really important. And then uh, having mentors and people that will tell you the truth and give you perspective and listening and taking that advice, as well as it sounds like being a mentor to others,
Hmm.
and getting perspectives from others that are you're helping to guide in their careers and life.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a good encapsulation of
Yeah.
elements of leadership required going forward?
Yeah. I think that reflects everything that we've talked about. And
Yeah.
certainly those are things that are all very important to me.
Yeah.
The mentorship aspect is one way of, I feel, is one way of giving back. And I think it's also part of my role as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to help others along. You have to look at the next generation
Mm-hmm.
of talent coming through
Mm-hmm.
and be able to not only help them in their careers, but talk to them and understand,
Mm-hmm.
even though what they're going through at age 25 is very different from where I
Right.
am.
Yeah.
And their world is very different, and their future is going to be very different from when I was 25. So
Yeah.
it's good to it's good to people talk to people of all you know a very diverse group,
Yeah.
age group that we should be mentoring as leaders.
It's very interesting you say that, because there are some people who will say, oh, this next generation coming up, they want this, they want that, they want to be involved in everything. But it sounds like the perspective you take is, look, they think the way they are based on the way they've grown up, and there's a lot of value in some of those perspectives.
Yeah, for sure. They're a product of the world today. It's just
Yeah.
like we were, right? So and it is a different group. I see a different kind of mindset, and
Mm-hmm.
they are different, but it's a good different,
Yeah.
I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. Is there anything out of everything we said that you want to emphasize as being a really important piece of advice to people that'll be listening to this episode for the future?
No, I don't think so. I think, when people ask me for advice, as I said, the number one thing I say is keep an open mind, because you don't know where it can take you.
Very
Right.
good.
And I never, graduating from Ivey in 2000, I never, ever, ever thought that I would be doing this today, working
Yeah.
in infrastructure technology at a bank. Never.
Look at
So,
that. And
yeah.
that's it. I think that might be the title of the episode, Keeping an Open Mind.
Okay, good.
Allison, thank you so much.
Thank
Hopefully at
you.
some point we'll be able to meet live. I love visiting
Yeah.
Toronto and doing meetings there. So hopefully one of these days we'll get to connect live, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see you at some of the homecoming activities that will all
Yeah.
be virtual this year. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best with the big challenges ahead of you.
Thank you.
As I said, I am a CIBC customer, so I'll just say thanks to all that you guys have been doing. I've personally benefited from some of the things that you've been doing to help us get through this time. So thank you for that.
Good. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Nice to talk.
All right. Didn't you feel so calm listening to Allison? Here is what I took away from that conversation. Allison valued being an introvert as a strength, particularly when combined with her self-confidence. It enabled her to be a better listener, which leads to being a stronger, more inclusive leader that can bring out the best in others. She embraced learning. She kept an open mind, takes advice not only from her leaders, but also from her team. She reflects on her areas of development and growth. She seeks to understand her blind spots and how she is perceived by others. All of this helped her lead her organization and her team through one of the most challenging periods in her career. And still, she came out with a smile. There is a lot we can learn from Allison. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, please do rate or leave a review. It'll help others like you find this show. See you next time.